I was shooting one of my videos last week, and my wife overheard me talking about some of the actors I've cast over the years. I was focusing more on generically casting actors for your low budget or no budget feature film. So she told me I should do a video focusing on some of the actors I've cast over the years who have became famous. And there are a number of them. I want to talk about how I found them. I like to say I discovered them. Just kidding, but I want to talk about how I found them, and I cast them in some of my earliest films. One of the people I want to focus on first is Morris Chestnut. Now, he was in a film, my very first feature film that my wife and I produced when we moved out here to Los Angeles, and that was at the very end of the 1980s. I almost can't even say it and think about it was so long ago. Over 35 years ago, we created that film. And Morris Chestnut, we saw a bunch of people, and we decided to cast him as the lead character. And obviously, he went on to have great success in the entertainment business. The film that he was cast in very first after my film was Boys in the Hood. And if you're familiar with that John Singleton feature, and he went on to become very successful and launched his career and the careers of a number of the actors in the project. But what I want to talk about a little bit is I want to go into how I came across him and how I decided that he was the right character for that role, lead role in the film. I think my title character's name was Jimmy. So long ago, I need to go back and look at the scripts. So as I'm talking, I'm going to do something that I haven't done in any of my other videos. I'm going to add some clips from that early film. It was called Into the Fire. And I'm going to add some clips that you can see. You can see a very young version of Morris Chestnut as he's in our film. Now, we shot that whole feature film. Again, it was a very low budget feature. And my wife and I were the producers. We were the writers. I was the director. She was the lead producer. A lot of times it was just us as the crew with the talent. Let's see. Again, like I said, I want to talk about how we went through the whole process. I might break this video up into parts because it's going to be kind of long, and I don't want to make it too long, because when I think about that and I think about my early days of filmmaking, I just start getting into storytelling mode, and I can go on and on and on. And my wife always keeps reminding me, keep it short, keep it short. But there's a lot of stuff in here that I think might be interesting to new filmmakers or even filmmakers who are, starting out and also are looking to hire talented people, but don't know if that is possible. So what we did was back then, when I moved to Los Angeles, there was a casting paper that was very popular called Dramalog. And I would get it every week religiously and go through it looking for roles, myself as an actor, looking for roles and applying to them. And those were the days of printed out headshots, 8x10 envelopes, your resume stapled on the back. And you would put those in an envelope and you'd take them to the United States Post Office with stamps on them and put it in there and send it off to the casting people. Smaller projects would go straight to the casting people or straight to the director or the producers themselves. So what we did was we ran our Dramalog ad, and I think that was probably the first time we placed a Dramalog ad. So they had some hoops you had to jump through to make sure you were really making a production and that it was something that wouldn't be trying to take advantage of, actors and their dreams of getting into the business. So we did everything we needed to do. We proved who we were and that, we had some experience in what we were doing. And we started getting flooded. I was amazed. And as an actor, I think that was my first peek behind the curtain of how much competition was out there. As a young actor in my 20s, I didn't really even, honestly, I wasn't even concerned with the competition. You have that youthful exuberance where, you know where you want to go and you're going to get there. So we were flooded with submissions for our film. It had a lot of parts in there. I think we ran the ads separately, as I can recall. We wanted to work on casting the leads first. So we had probably like 4 or 5 lead characters. And as they came in, we broke those down and, sorted through the photos. I can remember in our small apartment in Hollywood, we turned the living room into our production office. We had our little desk there with our computer, and we would take all the pictures and we would stack them on the floor so we could look at them for the different characters. And So I don't remember exactly how many actors we saw for the main lead role that Morris ended up getting, but we had a community room downstairs in the apartment building that we could book. So we had booked it one day, and we did multiple casting. We really wanted to take our time, and that's one of the things that I pride myself on, and it really served me well going forward in my career as a director, to take the time necessary to cast good talent. Even though I wasn't working with union budgets and union talent, I knew, and I think instinctively I knew from being an actor, that the story and the acting were going to carry the project, even if it was a micro budget. That didn't matter, because when people look at it, they invest in the believability of the characters, the believability of the story, the ability of the story and the characters to capture their attention. So I knew that instinctively, that I had to find the best actors that I could get from all of the ones that had submitted for our project. So as I can remember, we did multiple calls for that role, for that lead role. It might have been like the third or fourth round of actors that I met Morris. And he hadn't done anything that I know of before that. Nothing as a substantial as a lead role that we were casting for. So what we did was we brought him in for the initial call, and he did a great job. He did a great job. He was believable. He was enthusiastic, and I gave him some direction, and he was able to take that direction and input it into his performance. So I think what we did was we brought him in maybe 2 more times for callbacks, and the final callback, we brought him in with potential other actors who were going to play the co-lead. And the actor who played the co-lead, I don't think him and Morris worked together during our casting session, but we had another actor there for the final callback, and they both read, and I gave them direction. And some of the times what I do with actors, and that was something that I didn't realize what I was doing until years later, that during the auditions, I would tell them to come prepared and to be off book on the final audition. And both were, Morris was and the other actor were. And so I would give them directions that would alter what they had prepared for. And the reason I did that was I wanted to see if they were going to be argumentative, because I had done some small shorts in college. I had done a bunch of scenes in college, and sometimes I would have problems with actors who, wanted to do it their way, and they didn't want to take any input from the director or the writer. They wanted to change dialogue. That's college life. But I knew that if I was going to find actors who were able to take direction and who were willing to take direction and who were willing to listen to the director, and also actors who didn't have that much experience, I would have to see there and see on the rehearsals and to see on casting if they were an actor who would be cooperative. And that's the whole thing about filmmaking. It's a cooperative process. Even from my early days of directing Into the Fire with Morris as the lead character, I would ask actors to give me their input, and I would tell them, I want to hear ideas, but don't be offended if I don't use them. So that was another thing that I learned in college, I guess, working with a bunch of fellow students, directing projects and directing short projects for classes and projects outside of classes. I love to collaborate with people. Even to this day, I love to collaborate. But that's the first thing I always say. I want to hear your ideas, and if they're good, I can incorporate them into what we have planned. Or if your idea is better than mine, I'm willing to go with it. But if it's an idea that I don't want to use, don't feel offended, because I don't want people to shy away from giving ideas. But I don't want to get the whole set taken over with all actors. Now, I only say this to the lead actors because I want them to really invest in the character. I want them to build that backstory. I want them to have that excitement that I have about this project. And that's the thing that really stood out to me about Morris Chestnut, was that he would come to the set every day. He was always word perfect. So that proved to me that he took this serious, and he took his time. He invested in himself off the set to come ready to go. And at that time, we didn't have wardrobe people. We didn't have makeup people. My wife would handle some little bits of wardrobe. She'd handle some little bits of makeup, but most of the time we tell them to come camera ready. We figured out what their wardrobe was going to be, and we collaborated with the actor to bring that wardrobe to the set. So he always had his stuff. He always was on time. He never complained. Even some of the other actors, the co-lead in the project, he always, grumbled about things that he had to do. He ended up staying through the whole project and ended up working out good. But Morris never gave us any kind of problem. He was always enthusiastic. I could tell. And at that time, I was young also, and I didn't realize the impact of someone having that enthusiasm and that eagerness to work, and really taking, really being, how can I put this, really being happy that they were getting this opportunity to have a lead role in a film. Because when you don't have experience and you don't have credits, it's very rare that you'll just come right out the gate. Now, it's not unheard of, but it is very, very rare to come with no experience at all, especially in your 20s. I think he was in his 20s. He was still in college. And I was a few years older. I think I'm like about 5 or 6 years older than him. But he had just started college, and I think he was still attending college when he was doing our film. But he was always on time. He stayed. Sometimes we had to call him in because I was editing the film as we were shooting it. And the thing, too, that was really important, that he hung in there with us. The film ended up taking longer, much longer than my wife and I had thought it was going to go financially, because sometimes we'd have to raise a little bit more money, and then we'd shoot again. So the whole production stretched out. I think it could have been 6 or 7 months that we shot our very first feature film, and it just got stretched out due to fundraising, due to all kinds of little technical issues. But we stuck it out and we got it finished, and Morris hung in there with us the whole time. Near the end of the film, once we had completed all the principal photography with the majority of all the actors and all the big scenes, I still wanted to go back and do some pickup stuff with Morris alone. So sometimes it would be on the set, just me, my wife, Morris, and the camera. And we would be shooting all around Hollywood, all different locations. The film was set in Hollywood. It was about 2 teenagers whose sister was kidnapped or manipulated to work for the local drug dealer. And she went missing. And Morris went to look for his sister, and he found out that she was with this drug dealer, and he was trying to get her back, and blah, 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 blah. Typical inner city crime story. But we did a different take on the casting. We had a completely interracial cast, which is something that I was always drawn to. And I didn't, when I was writing the script, I didn't write it as one race occupying all the roles. I had mixed races. I had different races all in the whole film mixed together. What I ended up calling in the near future, when I started getting cast in a lot of those movies or TV series, where it would be what I call a Hollywood gang, where it would be people. It was humorous because it was just a thing that you would notice where they didn't want to be stereotypical. You'd have a black guy, you'd have a white guy, you have an Asian guy, you have all different races, men, women, all different races would make up the gang. But I ended up calling that a Hollywood gang. But that's how I had cast that very first feature we did, Into the Fire, different races in the film. And but again, Morris ended up coming to the set with us, just him, when we were doing a lot of pickups. And as it was editing, I realized there were a lot of scenes that I wanted to elaborate on. I might want to do, see him walk up from one place to the next, just so I'd have more content than I needed to edit the whole film. I think the whole film came out to have a running time of somewhere around 80 minutes. And it turned out okay. Like I said, again, to be honest, with my very first feature-length film, and had a lot of technical issues, but we got the whole film in the can. We got a rough cut and then a fine cut. And I never really secured distribution to it, because right after the filming, I heard, actually during the end of the filming, I heard from one of the co-stars that Morris was in on a third callback for a big Hollywood feature film with a young director from USC. And I didn't know anything about it because I wasn't called in on it. I was a little bit too old to play a teenager, even though I was still in my late 20s, very late 20s. But I was too old for that. And Morris, he actually looked the right age for Boys in the Hood. He fit that character actually. He was the right height, everything. And so he got cast. And during the final filming of ours, I think he came in a couple times for me during the filming and did some pickup shots when I was finishing up the film. We never really talked that much about it, but because he didn't know and I didn't know, the director hadn't. That was the director's first film from USC. He had got a deal to do this massive independent feature, and we didn't know who he was, and they didn't know who he was. And they said the funny thing they told me about this from the set was that the director would be directing the film, and then after they cut, he would go sit back in his trailer or sit back in his chair and play his handheld video games. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's a young guy. That's a real young guy. You know, no pressure. I'm helming a big time multi-million-dollar Hollywood feature, and in between takes, I'm gonna play video games. But that was just one funny story that they told me from the set of Boys in the Hood. But again, Morris was a talent that I spotted, didn't have any experience, and I could just tell from the audition, the enthusiasm and the energy and the passion. I think like I said, again, during the callback, he came and he was ready to go, you know, and he stood out from all the other actors that we had saw. And so that's how I ended up casting him for the lead role. So here's another quick story in closing. I know I've talked a little bit longer than I had planned on about this project, working with Morris Chestnut on my very first feature film. During the time Morris wrapped Boys in the Hood, the film was in its post-production period. So that was a long time in between there. And so he was still an unknown actor at that time. And I remember he must have heard somehow through the grapevine that I was working on another horror film with a producer that had called me up, and he had some equipment, higher quality equipment than I had at the time, and he wanted to do a production. So we teamed up and we were doing this very low budget feature film. And Morris called me up, and I still remember the phone call. Hey, Mr. Tucker, this is Morris. I heard you're doing another movie. I'd like to know if you got a role in there for me. And I didn't have a role in there for him because all the parts were cast. We had started shooting. We had been shooting for about a week, maybe 2 weeks before Morris had called me out of the blue. And so I said, yes, Morris, yeah, I got a part for you, because he was such a good actor in my very first film. I wrote him in a part. I wrote him in a scene where he was one of the victims of the woman who turned out to be the serial killer in the film we were working on. And I remember him sitting on the couch shooting that scene. It was just a one-day shoot, but of course I wanted to work with him again because I had such a great experience working with him on Into the Fire. And again, then the Boys to the Hood came out, and he started getting work and just continued to grow and have a successful career. And another reason in closing, I know that what really helped him, obviously his talent, obviously his looks and his skill at acting, but also his personality. He had a really great personality. He was like, you know, no BS talking, no trying to hype himself up, no talking about, you know, he's a young guy, no talking about things that, you know, we had no interest in, you know, no just shooting the breeze kind of stuff. He was basically all business, talked a little bit about his life. We talked about our life, and this was in between stuff on the takes, but he was always pleasant. He was always a good person to be around that, you know, could have just been a friend if we weren't working on this project together. But again, he was one of the first actors that I worked with in my very first feature film that actually became a star. And right now, as a matter of fact, he's another lead role in a series that's on. It's either ABC or NBC. It's called Watson. You can look that up. I'll put some clips in the video, not clips, but I'll add some stills from Watson. I don't want to get a copyright violation here on YouTube, but I'll add some stills from Watson. But I'll show a bunch of clips. Again, as I'm talking, you've seen a bunch of clips already of Into the Fire. And thanks again. I'll join you on the next, join me, not I won't join you. You join me on the next one when I talk about another actor who worked in one of our films, who is on a current series right now. I'll save that for the next time. Thanks.